Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's Father Mark.
Hi, Father Mark. How are you?
Uh,
I tried to use the link on the email and I failed. Did you use the link on an email that you were given?
I think I did.
Well, maybe I wasn't holding my tongue right then. That's a joke.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I didn't use email. I have Zoom on my on my cell phone, and I used it.
My
Okay.
link wouldn't open. I
Yeah,
had to
I had
type
to
in
use,
the meeting ID.
I'm with you.
And I have someone coming to my door in a minute if I have to leave for a sec.
All right. I'll go to the email and see if I can forward the email to everyone and tell them to use the link for the meeting ID.
Yeah.
The meeting ID.
Yeah, I didn't need a password, but
Okay, I'll be back.
Is that Mark?
Yes, it is.
Mark, so good to see you.
Well, it's good to be here. Last week I couldn't get in. I tried, but to no avail.
Well, I kept trying during the service to reply to Tim Kidder, who I saw had done, and I couldn't get that. I couldn't get it to do that. So I just wrote him afterwards.
Yeah.
There's Claire. Hi, Claire.
Hello.
Hi, Claire.
Hello. We might not have as many people this week. I don't know if y'all have already discussed this, that the link in this week's email gave me an error. So I had to go
Yeah.
back to last week to find it.
Oh, I just typed in the meeting ID. I went back and just opened Zoom and typed in the meeting ID and it worked.
That's what happened to me.
Hear me? You guys can't hear me, can you? This is Peter. I'm off.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
you can't? Claire, what was the date of that email you used to get the link?
Okay, let me just a moment. The one that worked for me went July 23rd. The one that's titled "Join Us this Sunday for Morning Prayer."
Okay,
That worked.
thank you. I'm
You're
gonna see if I can forward that to folks.
I guess mine was just messed up. Okay, let me make Peter the host.
I just realized this is recorded, so everyone's gonna see me, huh?
It is.
It is.
Oh well.
Oh, well.
I had to
I
have
forgot to
technical
have this before
support.
church, so.
I had to have technical support. I clicked on the Zoom thing and it gave me an invalid error, so Amy's
All of
helping
us.
me.
All of us did that.
Oh, it did? Oh.
Yes.
Well, that's weird.
Could be a Zoom issue.
She said it's got to be a Zoom issue. I went, okay.
You know, it's always something.
Yeah, it doesn't say, I'm not able to say forward all. And I don't know the people in the class, but, it just says forward. When given a choice to who to send this July 23rd email to. Anybody else have an idea?
I think Flo normally is in there too, isn't she? Is it Flo?
Yeah, Flo.
I think so, yeah.
Start writing down names, I guess.
Yeah, and then we can set up an email chain. Let
Yeah.
me email the link to Flo just in case.
Sure. Okay, you're emailing Flo?
I am.
Yes.
I remember the Art and Suzanne,
Susan Shobe,
the Shobes,
Carrie.
Carrie. Yeah.
Harry.
When I first tried to sign on, I kept getting an error.
Yes.
So then I had to go back through my old mail to go to a previous link. But there's a Zoom meeting error, the first,
Yeah, I think we all did.
30.
Yes.
okay,
Yeah,
It's a
that's what we're
Zoom
trying to,
okay.
yeah, we're
Yeah.
trying to figure out who usually attends, so can email them a working
Oh.
link. Since, yeah, pretty much all of us had that issue today.
Okay.
And pardon me while I eat breakfast.
Right now.
Father Mark.
Yes. Hi.
Hi, Father Mark.
It's good to be with you today.
Hi.
And everybody else, sorry. I just haven't seen him in a while. It's wonderful.
Yes, I've been sort of confined to the house.
I understand. That's a good thing. We have to look at it as a good thing, right?
Right.
Everybody.
When I compare my difficulties with other people, I'm very truly blessed, and I can't keep on saying woe is me, but how great it is.
Good.
Amen.
You've got a great outlook, and that's so important for all of us.
Yes.
Claire, your toast looks pretty good.
Thank you.
You're
Very,
making me
very
hungry.
yummy fruit spread.
Oh.
Well,
whew,
yes.
Mary,
I love this stuff.
it's good to share those things.
Mhm.
I had my granola and yogurt during the service. That's one thing we can't do at church.
I know.
My Atkins shake.
I actually just got out of the shower and was getting dressed, and I thought, yeah, I can't do this.
No,
And shows.
just have to do it sooner
Actually, I'm just gonna call.
and drive. You know, I miss being with everybody, but Zoom has some benefits or advantages.
Right. That is right. I see Peter's ceiling, but no Peter.
He was here. He
Well, if
went
you can contact her and let her know that we're trying to get a hold of people and
to get his granola. Or toast.
only join the class and then.
I'm still behind on reading my book. Are we supposed to be all the way through?
Yeah, we're finished.
Yeah, this is the wrap up.
Is that right?
No.
Oh,
But I mean, last week I read like 2 or 3 chapters, and what he was doing was in like chapter 8 or something. I thought, wow, how's it late?
They're little chapters though,
Well, yeah.
packed full.
So I just need to know how far I need to read.
Go through, I will let you know. I'm gonna have to develop a list. I'm trying to determine that, and I'll write you down. Miss Susan Shobe. And I'll send out a plan to folks after today's lesson. Maybe call her on the phone. All right, let's get me back on this camera. Host attendee. It logged me out once I got off camera. Oh my goodness.
We can see you
Oh, you can see me?
and we
yes.
can hear you.
Now I'm getting a phone call.
Yeah, Claire, move it. I don't think it's 80 music.
Yeah, Lee's going to see if she can contact Amy. I'll get the class started here. Let's see, support English. I've never gotten off, gotten back on again. I mean, I can't see y'all.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh.
Zoom meeting is using webcam. Hide, block, webcam. Nope, don't want any of that. Maybe we'll just get started and I'll imagine that you're all there looking at. No, that's not going to work as well.
well, it's not your imagination. We are looking at you.
We can see you.
Am I centered at least?
Sort of.
Sort of? How, is that better?
That's better.
Okay.
Part of your chin was cut off.
Peter,
Yes, ma'am.
could I make a suggestion that we all mute ourselves unless we're going to talk? Because sometimes people don't realize that there's noise going on in their room, and then it's kind of disruptive.
Sounds like a great idea. How do you mute?
I think you as host can actually mute all of us, but
Now
you
that I
go-
can't,
If you go to the lower left of your screen,
I don't have a screen. That's my
well,
problem.
but I'm talking to everybody else because we don't want you to
Okay.
mute it.
Right.
If you go to the lower left of your screen, there's a little microphone there and it says mute. And if you click on it, you're muted. And when you want to talk, you click on it again and you're unmuted.
Thank you.
Except mine is in the upper, above the picture. So everybody's may not be in the lower left-hand corner.
But mine doesn't show unless you go to that spot. So just take your cursor and wander all over your screen until you find it.
Oh, okay. Okay. So who's here? I'm writing an email list for our future. Start in the upper left-hand corner of the screen and let me know who. I can create an email
Susan
list.
Shobe.
Thank you, Susan.
Father Mark.
Father Mark.
Nancy.
Nancy. Thank you.
Curry.
Flo Kirby.
Terry
Linda.
Hancock,
Can you both repeat that? I'm sorry.
Carrie Hancock,
Hi, Carrie.
Glenda Harden.
Hi, Glenda.
that's in alphabetical order.
Oh, great. And that's everybody. Is that correct?
No,
Yeah.
Diane Torres, I was on mute the first time and forgot to get off of mute.
Your name again?
Diane Torres,
Hi, Diane.
hi.
Valerie Sanders.
Hi, Valerie.
Gloria.
And Helen Pickles here too. She's wandered off from the screen, but
Okay.
there are
And Claire
12 of
Stratman.
us. And Claire,
Claire Stratman's here.
Hi, Claire Stratman.
there are a total of 12, including you, Peter.
Okay, thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4. Somehow I got 13. It's a bonus person. Hey, Lee, do you know how to get me back so I can see folks on screen? She's a librarian. Susan knows about magic of librarianship.
Librarians are definitely magical.
They do stuff. I am. They can hear me. They can see me. I can't see them. Oh, she's a librarian. I can see y'all. I'm not embarrassed. I'm just amazed. That'll be $50. She's been hanging out with lawyers or something. Let's get started with a prayer. Let's bow our heads. Thank you for loving us as you do. Help us to further understand the implications of how our individual biases, governmental laws and policies have steered our nation in a direction which still exclude people of color from enjoying many of the benefits of living a just life in their communities, state, and nation. And I ask for your guidance during this lesson and pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Lesson today, 8, 9, and 10. The author opens up chapter 8 with a statement. It's not the title, but the subtitle. The day I learned race is more a social construct than a biological certainty. And she came into this, entered adulthood and going through childhood, believing that each race has special talents and not individuals. And some groups are, and then she came through what she had learned and through her education, that some groups, or came to believe that some, and rightfully so, some groups are funneled into some areas of interest or their vocations, their jobs, via being excluded from many areas of where they can practice their vocation. So she saw that there were many people of color, I guess as a younger person and a younger adult, in areas of entertainment and athletics, and it is so in those areas in particular. I think it's obvious. If you have talent and you work hard, and you have the right people around you, then your talent, your abilities can't be hidden. It's harder to say, oh, well, this person has great athletic abilities and they can help us win, therefore they can be on our team, and we want them on our team very badly. That type of racism is perhaps one of the more prevalent beliefs or racial stereotypes that people have. I have a video, oh boy, that I will share with you now that has, chapter 8 was really short, but I think this one sums it up real well. It's from Myth of Race, which I found on YouTube again. And we're just gonna watch for 3.5 minutes this time. And I practiced this morning, so I think it'll be smooth. Time will tell. Here, fumbling with my computer. Now you see my desktop. And now I go over to YouTube. And that's not the one I want. I want this one. And this will stop in about 3.5 minutes.
Now it's sort of hard to believe that the federal government nationalized and introduced redlining. In a funny way, it wasn't just giving something to whites, it was constructing whiteness. Whiteness meant, as in the past, whites had meant being a citizen and being a Christian. It now meant living in the suburbs.
Only 50 years before, European ethnics were believed to be distinct races. Now, in these new segregated neighborhoods, they blended together as white Americans.
We did have different religious groups. We were mixed up there, but we were an all-white community, and I think it's an unrealistic world. I think there's something sterile about everyone being on the same economic level and everyone being the same color.
It certainly doesn't promote a feeling of a whiter world, whiter, not whiter, to live in a place where there are only people that look like you.
Cartoonist Bill Griffith remembers moving from Brooklyn to Levittown as a kid.
It's an untenable artificial world. You're creating a weird utopia in a way. A utopia of middle-class white people who were trying to deny that they were living in a multi-racial world. And how long can you keep that up? You can't keep that up forever. Whether there were going to be black people in Levittown was just, it would be almost the equivalent of saying, are there going to be Martians in Levittown?
Basically, the idea of whiteness is who's included, who's part of the family, and it has material consequences. Blacks weren't completely left out of the housing market. The housing market that they were exposed to was largely public housing. And public housing, first of all, was built almost exclusively, with a few exceptions, in the central city. And after World War II, we started building these larger and larger public housing projects, which were called vertical ghettos. All of a sudden, you're concentrating large numbers of poor people of color in one place.
Another federal program, urban renewal, was supposed to make cities more livable. 90% of all housing destroyed by urban renewal was not replaced. 2/3 of those displaced were Black or Latino.
Fair housing for all human beings who live in this country is now a part of the American way of life.
Stop there, and I'll come back to class. It's so exciting. I see part of you. Wait just a minute now. Yeah, you can. Oh, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes. Yes.
I was able to do this last week.
We can still see your screen.
Stop share, and there you go again. Oh, technology. So, what are your thoughts? What I saw there was construction. What I found when I saw this video was, and I thought it fit so well, and I also found it interesting that the author's book seems to follow the march of this video. We have a situation where we're literally constructing a nation where whites and what is white, and then there's another what is black, because they're so separate geographically due to the way the housing market was constructed post-World War II. And we discussed that last week with how the FHA created a situation where if one, and they wrote it into policy that if a black family were allowed into a neighborhood, it might wreck the neighborhood, therefore don't let them in, exclude them. And they couldn't get financing because the financiers followed the guidance. And now we have two different worlds, basically, white and black. But I found it interesting that, and we'll cover this in the next chapter a little more deeply, we have all these different types of white people that came from different European nations and other parts of South America, India, Asia, all continents. And then now we're creating a white and a black world. Whereas before, earlier, there was discrimination against Irish, Russians, Poles, Italians, but now we're white and American and black or colored and American. Any other thoughts or extrapolations on that thought? Those thoughts?
I have a friend who is African American who grew up in Queens, and he told me he's probably, I would guess, early 60s. And he said that he never saw a white person until he joined the military.
Wow.
And I was surprised at that. And he said, well, there were Sicilians in my neighborhood, but they weren't considered white.
Right.
And that just kind of blew me away, because I just think of Sicilians as Italians and Italians as white, so.
And for those of you who don't know, Queens is, yes, it's in New York City, but it's on the west end of Long Island, and the south side of Brooklyn. It's an interesting thing about New York City in particular, how Italian Americans were discriminated against so much, and so many Italian neighborhoods there. And now, generations later, still there are Italian neighborhoods, but discriminated less because it's so much easier for them to mix because of the color of their skin, and they're not discriminated against in the same way. They've got that ticket. Oh yeah, my skin looks pretty, or generally white. Yeah, interesting. Anybody else?
I think that's. Oh,
okay.
Sorry. My turn. Okay. guess that's kind of the story of my family, because my grandfather's parents came to the United States from Russia around when the Tsar fell. And so they're Russian Jews. And in order to be accepted, basically all my family had to do was change their last name and just not make it well known that we were Jewish.
Right.
That's all we had to do. That was enough that people accepted my family. And I never thought of that as like such a privilege that that's all it took. I always thought how terrible that we had to change name and hide our religion to be accepted.
Right.
But then now I'm seeing it kind of as how wonderful, like how privileged is it for us that that's all it took and we were able to do that. Whereas if our skin had been darker, changing our name, changing our religion wouldn't have been enough.
Not at all. Susan, you had something?
Yeah, in 1970, when I graduated from college, I got a job teaching school in Houston in the 5th Ward. And the way they were going to integrate the schools was bring some white teachers into all black schools. And I had an elementary school that I had a class of 33 kids in 5th grade, and one was white and one was Hispanic, and the rest of them were black. And many of those kids never saw white people, ever. They lived in the 5th Ward. They were there. That was what they knew. And one time I said something about I was going to Dallas for the weekend to the kids, and they were like, "Oh my goodness, you're going to Dallas." And another one said, "Well, it's the same thing when she went to Europe." So for them, you know, their world was right there. And so they were not seeing a white world at all.
And I think, you know, having read this book, my mind really went to a place where I started seeing that, oh, this is why we've constructed two different worlds, two different cultures in the United States, and it's through policy. And we shouldn't be surprised that we have a problem now.
Yeah.
As the cartoonist said in that video,
Yeah.
You know, you can't be surprised that it can't last forever, that we have these two different worlds, excluding one of those two worlds from so many of the perks of being American or living in a society that has just shutting down benefits in general. It's amazing how, and it was so simple to construct two different worlds. And maybe it's, now that we have two different, especially economic systems, what do we do to undo it? Their policy, and we're talking right now.
I don't know if you all realize that even before slaves were first brought into North America, and something like 95% of them were to Latin and Central America, that a number of blacks came over as indentured servants. And there were even some intermarriages because there were so few people. And in some places, blacks even had the right to vote. And one of those rare times in history that we had gone backwards on human rights is when all those things then were taken away, when slavery became part of the culture of the colonies.
Yeah, I was reading recently how, and I was surprised to see, and I suppose many of you knew already, but Jamestown had at least one person of color who was a slave. A ship came there, and they dropped off and sold 3 persons. And there's a written record of her being, at least one that I was reading about specifically. So this goes back 400 years, literally. And it's interesting you say, Helen, that we had a chance, or there was a time, and now gone backwards. But it's interesting, you know, we had prejudice against other white persons coming from these different nations in our history, but it's so easy to exclude for skin color because it's a visual, and we did it. Okay, moving right along. So there we were in chapter 9. And the subtitle she uses is, oh, I'm sorry. And Claire, you mentioned something. I had a friend and they decided they were going to go to Lutheran church as opposed to a Jewish synagogue. And my friend and I were just talking this past week. He said, yeah, I found out my parents were both Jewish, coming from Hungary, and I was 13. And it just completely upended me. It really threw him for a loop. He had to land on his feet somehow, a real challenge. And he had formed, because we're humans and he was a kid and part of our society, he had prejudices against Jews. Now he's Jewish. And it's funny, he has 2 other brothers. One's Jewish practicing, one is nominally a nothing, and one's is practicing Lutheran. And there you are. It really, people and their religion and their skin colors, they still had the ticket of being white. Moving on to chapter 9, how the subtitle is How White People Decided White People Were Best of All. And I found this real interesting, and some of you, again, were aware already, but I was not. So the author introduces us to, and she started to see that white people not seeing they were part of the race problem and had to learn more. And so going back to 1684 with a man named Francois Bernier, a physician who, and I mentioned this in passing almost in the first lesson. He traveled as far as from France, where he was born and practiced as a physician, to India. He worked for a very powerful person there for 10 years and moved on to work for other people in that area of the world. He came up with and published his 4 persons of different color or different, different types of people, I'm sorry, different races. One was European, these are all included in the same subcategory: European, North African, Indian, and Southeast Asian. That's group number 1. Then number 2 is Sub-Saharan Africans. Number 3, East and Northeast Asians. And number 4, which really made me laugh because they're white now, the Sami people. And those people are a people that are commonly found in Norway, Sweden, and the Kola Peninsula, which is in present-day USSR, far north. Murmansk is the major city on this peninsula. But it's an interesting grouping of 4 different subcultures within the group of all persons in the world, excuse me. And then 5 years later, another person published, his name's Jean-Baptiste Chardin, another Frenchman, and he's a jeweler, so he went looking for precious stones, which had him traveling broadly. And he spoke, and our author was careful to point out, he spoke of the beautiful light-skinned women of the Caucasus Mountains. So we have the subtext of sexuality and sensuality being worked into the story of white superiority. Because after all, if you're sexually wonderful, sensual people, and also clearly Europeans are the best in the world, well, are by the, this is where the basis for white superiority from the perspective of Europeans is starting. And by the 1920s, which is a big skip in time, I know, but this is, excuse me, by the 1720s. It's a typo in my notes. White people had come to think of paleness as beautiful. And now we're also entering the age of enlightenment and reason. So science is what people are looking to for understanding the world around them. And so this age of enlightenment in Wikipedia, the great source of all knowledge, describes age of enlightenment that goes from 1715 to 1787, no, 89. And that's when we're looking for answers through science, among other things, and philosophy. And thinking that race is, and they start measuring skulls and comparing peoples of some cultures to Black people. And also it was a very interesting diagram, how I think it was a Spaniard or something like that, was similar to people who were Black, who were clearly discriminated against, and how these people from Spain, or I honestly forgot where they were from, were closely related to folks who were Negro, and therefore they were to be discriminated against. But race is not based in, race is a human construct, in fact is not based in biology. So I have a little film about that, and it's another 3 minutes. And maybe I'll be able to do this a little faster this time. Watch as we go to the film.
You may think you know exactly what race you are, but how would you prove it if someone disagreed with you? The fact is, even though race drives a lot of social and political outcomes, race isn't real. One of the first people to attempt to categorize humans according to race was a German scientist around 1776. He came up with 5 different groups according to physical appearance and geographic origin of their ancestors. Americans of European descent eagerly bought into this type of thinking around the same time. Some historians have said the idea that there were different races helped them resolve the contradiction between a natural right to freedom and the fact of slavery. If whites were their own distinct category, then they could feel a lot better about denying freedom to people who they labeled Black and decided were fundamentally different. But as political priorities change, definitions of race in America adjust right along with them. For example, if you were of Mexican birth or ancestry in the United States in 1929, you were considered white. Then the 1930 census changed that to non-white to limit immigration. Later, when the U.S. needed to increase its labor force during World War II, these people were switched back to white. And what it took to be Black once varied so wildly throughout the country, from 1/4 to 1/16 to the infamous 1 drop of African ancestry, that people could actually change races just by crossing state lines. Then suddenly in 2000, the government decided that Americans could be more than one race and added a multiracial category to the census. This has left many Americans scratching their heads when it comes to selecting who they are. As many as 6.2% of census respondents selected some other race in a 2010 survey. The idea that someone might look one way and identify another way, or that they might be really hard to place in a racial category, is not new. This is why there was a public debate about whether MSNBC's Karen Finney could say she was Black, or how we can't even agree on the racial label assigned to the President of the United States. Of course, many people feel their racial identity is very clear and very permanent, but the fact that some people have changed theirs and that no one can really argue with them shows how shaky the very idea of race is. This is all because there isn't a race chromosome in our DNA that people can point to. It simply doesn't exist. When the medical community links race to health outcomes, it's really just using race as a substitute for other factors, such as where your ancestors came from, or the experiences of people who may have been put in the same racial group as you. Dorothy Roberts explains that sickle cell anemia is a prime example of this. The disease is linked to areas with high rates of malaria, which include some parts of Europe and Asia in addition to Africa. It's not actually about race at all. This, of course, does not mean that the concept of race isn't hugely important in our lives. The racial categories to which we're assigned can determine real-life experiences, they can drive political outcomes, and they can even make the difference between life and death. But understanding that racial categories are made up can give us an important perspective on where racism came from in the first place.
They say that so well, and it only took 3 minutes. Any comments?
So this actually comes
Ooh,
up a
I
lot
don't
in my
need that.
job.
Be right back.
Okay. But yeah, in my job,
Common. They are all quite rare, extremely.
Thank you. You were saying.
So this comes up a lot in my job because if y'all don't know, I'm a registrar at Temple High School. So the biggest thing I do is I enroll students and withdraw them. And when they enroll, there's plenty of paperwork. And one of the forms that has to be filled out is our federal ethnicity and race form. And literally half of the people that have to fill it out wrong, because what's weird is ethnicity on this official form is either Hispanic or not, and they have to pick exactly one of those options. And race, they can pick one or more, and it's white, Black, African American, Native American, Asian, like there's lots of options. And it's really interesting because I have to tell people, they'll just check Hispanic and turn it in. I have to say, I'm sorry, you have to race as well. And they're like, but I'm just Hispanic. And it kind of drives me crazy. I'm like, I know, but the federal government says something else as well. Why? I don't know. But yeah, so the constant thing is I've realized that, yeah, a lot of people, they identify one way, but are told because of this form, you have to pick another option as well. And there's no real reason.
Oh, well, that's fun. How fun for you. And what's your job there at Temple High School?
I'm the assistant registrar, all about enrolling, withdrawing students, and sending records back and forth between schools.
Assistant registrar. It kind of cut you out there the first time around. Interesting. Yeah, this idea, or this situation we have where we understand clearly, at least I didn't before and I do now. It's a human construct. Race is a human construct. Yes, we use it in common language because we all know what we're talking about, but the lines are so blurry. And I often think of Thomas Jefferson's extended family, where he has, you go into the web, you see the pictures of the family, and so much of his family is are now people of color, in that he had multiple children, and I'm not remembering how many kids he had and how many are of color and how many aren't, but still, that's what makes up our nation on so many levels. Going on with chapter, let's see, is that the end of chapter 9?
Peter?
Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to recommend, I belong to this group called Be the Bridge, which is a Facebook group that you can belong to. And they have a podcast on there called Scene on Radio, SCENE on radio. And they have season 2 is called, it's called Seeing White. And they start from back, in the early part of the United States and kind of go through, it's around an hour each podcast. They have 14 different, it really is excellent. What I did is I was sewing masks, so I would just listen to it while I was sewing masks. And it really is an excellent podcast if you wanted to listen to it and learn more about what it is that whiteness is.
So that's called Scene on Radio, SCEEN.
SCENE.
ECENE.
And I was going to recommend, is there some way that we could have a common, I don't know, chat time or things that we could recommend, or a page that we could put on, maybe for our parishioners, I don't know, something like that we could recommend books or podcasts to people.
That sounds like a great idea. Amy, communications director, would be the kind of person, and then
But Valerie, if you're on the Facebook Christchurch Parishioners page, you could mention something there.
The Christchurch Parishioners page on Facebook.
On Facebook, and it's for it's for current members of our church.
Do you think that would work for a place to make comments, Valerie? Would that be adequate, or are you looking for something specific to this group?
Well, it would be nice if we had something specific for the group, but I would be very happy to post it to the parishioners, because I think it's something that everyone could really profit by. And the Be the Bridge, the Facebook group, has some wonderful podcast videos, all kinds of things, a lot of great material.
Okay, Be the Bridge on Facebook. And for Christchurch, Carrie, again, was
It's Christchurch Parishioners.
okay.
If you're on the Christchurch Facebook page, there's one of the places you can click on is groups, and you could request there to join it if you aren't currently on it. That's just one thought. It might be better if we could create something just for this group to start with.
Okay. I mean, it'd be another group. Yeah, okay.
Well, or another option, I love spreadsheets. We could just make a spreadsheet. I'd be happy to do that if people want to email me whatever sources that they like, podcasts and such, and I'd be happy to pop it into a spreadsheet and then share it with y'all.
Okay, and then I'm sending out that email to everybody, so you'd have the email list of the members of the class. That sounds good. But there's two ways we can handle that then. Wonderful. All right, what time do we have?
1:40.
Okay, we're good. So there we were with the Sami people. And Jean-Baptiste Chardin. These people have such lovely French names. Let's see, Angel of Enlightenment. And yes, we are moving on to chapter 10. And the subtitle she used for this chapter was Thinking for the First Time About Who Could and Who Could Not Melt into the Pot, which we've covered earlier. There were two different worlds created through the different neighborhoods, and that if you're excluded, you're not able to melt into the pot. We mentioned already that there was whiteness created. For a while there, we had separate neighborhoods more prevalent, but then there was a white world created after World War II through the use of suburbs, and the meaning of whiteness often meant you lived in the suburbs, though not exclusively, of course. And being white, having that ticket of being white often became a matter of survival for many people through the hundreds of years of our since Jamestown. There was the Indian Removal Act, which meant that those folks would be losing their lands and have to inhabit a different place somewhere else, far less difficult to live in, and Trail of Tears. Many people lost their lives walking cross country in that forced march. English only, and then also the English only acts of the 20th century. Let's see. Have you been or seen an example of Anglo culture as superior or should be spread? And the author has some examples. I'll start us off with one of the author's examples. Author is the teacher. She came to her job thinking how lucky it was, and she worked in Cambridge with many kids who were of color, believing that her students were lucky to have her as their teacher, because she was white and she had information.
I thought that was the
He helped.
oddest thing I had ever read.
But she wasn't the only one that had those beliefs going into their teaching careers.
I was a teacher for 27 years and never
Yeah.
occurred to me anybody was lucky. I just found a discipline that I was fascinated about and developed an expertise about it and wanted to convey that. But I just thought that any of you other teachers, did that ever enter your brain?
Well, look at the world she came from, though, right?
Yeah.
Basis of her belief is also where she came from that suburb in Massachusetts, outside of Boston, and it's like being from Brooklyn, where they saw no white people, she saw no black people, and then her parents also kept her, kept her from seeing other things that they, from seeing the world. So I think she went to a very exclusive all-white college, virtually all-white colleges as well.
I thought that statement was actually very eye-opening because I'd never thought of it that way at all.
Right.
And I'm not sure she thought of it that way then when she was actually hired to teach, unless I haven't read this in a few days, so I could go back. Maybe I misunderstood, but that meant a lot to me to read that, because I could see how it's true that it's the same thing as thinking your ideas are better than anyone else's, regardless of race or socioeconomic. You just think because you believe it so strongly that that's good for everybody.
Sure. I think we've all been on both sides of a conversation where we're the ones speaking too much because we really believe what we believe in. Or we're listening to someone, and I had a conversation like this just last week with someone who was very much a proponent of people pulling themselves up by their own bootstraps. And I wanted to come in with, there is also this exclusion from the economic system, from housing, et cetera, as we've discussed in our class. But if all you hear is your own beliefs, and you have to be open to hearing others. Thank you, Carrie. We got down to that. Here, another example from the 12th century where the English invaded Ireland. And I think many of us are familiar with how the Irish were treated not as good as when it came to English culture. And that continued for centuries.
The Irish and everybody else.
Yes. The Irish happened to be close enough to invade. I think that happened also in World War II with the Germans, where they were the super race. And let's make sure that everybody else gets to enjoy us governing them. The Manifest Destiny in the United States, our culture needed to be spread broadly in the Western Hemisphere in particular. Anyone else, some thoughts in this regard?
It's interesting how sometimes groups that have been treated badly then turn around. And I was thinking about shortly after the American Civil War, when there were a group of Irish immigrants that actually set fire to what was then called a colored orphanage. Because as Blacks were moving up north and trying to, find a way, then they felt like they would again be displaced. And so it was a horrible thing that was never in my history books when I was growing up.
No.
You know, many things weren't.
Yeah, and it's easy to identify the other, especially when they're black. But that happens, you know, around the world. I remember hearing about a radio show in Rwanda where they're trying to get past the Hutu and Tutsi tribal, you know, with the genocide that happened. I forgot what year it was. Clinton was the president. But there's a real popular radio show they do that now, and it's about two of the smaller tribes, and they're living on opposite hillsides. It's kind of like a Romeo and Juliet story as well, but they're trying to show how, you know, yes, we have different tribes, but we're all people, and we're not that different. And please learn to live together. And it's working. People are starting to take on some of the propaganda, let's call it what it is, but it's good propaganda, helping people to live together in Rwanda. Let's see, the Indian schools in the United States. We talked about that in the first lesson as well. 1874, Carlisle, Indian School of Carlisle, Indiana, was the first one where we were taking, often, or I think generally, kids out of their homes, and so they are losing their parents, their siblings, their language, their food, their clothes, their music, and then they have to go back home again after they've had their culture stamped out of them or rubbed out of them. And there were 150 of those schools. Last one closing, I believe it was in the 60s, but that could be wrong. But at any rate, there were 150, and it was a wide practice in the United States.
That makes, can I be heard?
Please.
Oh, well, I'm thinking about, you mentioned Germany, and something that has always resonated. Am I still online?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it was how, you know, the Germans would go into particularly Poland and Czechoslovakia, and even in Russia, and choose blonde, blue-eyed, you know, that would children that were anywhere from infants at their mother's breast up to about 9 years old. I think they didn't think they could do much with them if they were, and placed in German homes because, you know, but I've thought, and then after the war, when the parents, if they were still alive, the birth parents would, you know, there was a big deal of trying to locate the children, and they had already bonded then with the other, and the things that the children that had been shuffled around, and what a difficult life they had, or they had later years. So it was just
terrible. Yeah, and I guess one of the things that is driven home to me, you know, there's a group that gained political power in Germany post World War I, and I don't remember where I heard this story, but it was, oh yes, it was how the flu influenced things. President Wilson was discussing with what to do with Germany post World War I, and the French ambassador who was negotiating with President Wilson was saying, you know, we need to punish them, and they did suffer terribly during World War I. But you have a political organization that has gained power in Germany. It's not the German people necessarily. Then, okay, once you have power, you have an army, and that army is made up of young, and I've been a young and impressionable soldier, and you are, when you were told to do something, you do it. And the other thing is, once you're in an army, it's not, and you can ask soldiers about this, once you're holding a rifle and you're in a group fighting another group, it's, I want to live and I want to kill them because I want to stay alive. You're not consulting your political beliefs so much as it is, it's time to stay alive. And the punishment post World War I was against the German people as a nation, as opposed to which when you are making them do reparations. And then we end up with World War II. And that's my little soapbox for, it's not at all in this book that we're studying right now. So yes, it's easy to extrapolate and go from a political system and leaders to blaming a people who live in a nation. But, and also that whole Aryan race thing goes back to the 17th century. They call it Aryan race, but it's really whiteness. Maybe they like blonde hair better than brunette Germans, but it goes back at least to the 17th century where white was better. White gives you a free pass. We've talked about that, to wealth and self-image that's positive for throngs of generations. And then we go to the at the end of chapter 10 with the Supreme Court decision of Takeo Ozawa in his citizenship suit. And I will show you a 1-minute video for that. Share. We will not be seeing a race car.
Only fast and very.
Like I said, we will not be seeing a race car.
We'll not be seeing a what?
There is this expensive car here. We don't want to see that.
Oh, okay.
We don't want to see that. There's this little zoom thing in my way on my screen. That's coming up in a minute. There we go.
Ozawa's from Japan. He comes to the United States. He makes the claim that he's white and therefore he should be a citizen based on his skin color. And he says to the court, you know, if you look under, you know, my arm, under my shirt, like my skin is lighter than so many of these other European people's. You know, I am white. Furthermore, I have learned English. I have taught my children English. I go to a church. I think he attended Berkeley. You know, he's just saying, I am a patriot, make me an American. And he's pointing out his skin color as a way of becoming white. So the Supreme Court comes back to this and says, only Caucasians are white, and you, Ozawa, are not a Caucasian. Therefore, you are not white. And they deny him citizenship based on that.
Mind-blowing. So you can be disqualified citizenship for centuries in the United States for not being Caucasian or white. And as we've learned, Caucasian is yes, people are from the Caucasus, but it's a human, this idea that white Caucasian it's a human construct. And I'll be sending you an email regarding what's coming up for next week. I plan to get that done soon, very soon. And any more comments before we close?
What chapters for next time? I'm sorry.
I'll let you know via email. Yeah, I'll let you know via email. And I have all your email addresses in the directory. And if it needs to be updated, please do that. I needed to update mine. We'll close in prayer. And unless someone else has any other questions or comments, very good. I'll share the prayer with you. Prayer of St. Francis. And this is our opportunity to, as our bishop said on YouTube, that I was able to listen to just this morning, you can pray to action. And this is a prayer for action. Lord, make me a channel of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me bring love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. Lord, grant that I may not seek to be consoled as to console, understood as to understand, loved as to be as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, in pardoning that we are pardoned, in dying we are born to eternal life. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. And I'll look forward to seeing you next week. I'll get that email out as well.
Thank you, Peter.
You're very welcome. Thank you all for being here. Bye-bye.